They say death comes for us all. But for these men, it came a little sooner. People had died, literally 20 meters from shelter. And it all started with a scream that can only be described as otherworldly. My father served 22 years in the United States Air Force. He flew in Vietnam. He did things he never talked about. He was not a superstitious man. He was not the kind of person who embellished stories for attention. In 22 years of military service, deployments, combat, classified missions, he came home with exactly one story he couldn't explain. This is that story. After Vietnam, my father was stationed at an Air Force base in Greenland. If you've never thought about what that actually means, Greenland, let me paint a picture for you. Greenland is one of the most hostile environments on the planet. The base sat in the landscape of ice and wind and almost nothing else. Temperatures that could kill an unprotected person in minutes. Darkness for months at a time. And the blizzards. The blizzards were not like anything most people have experienced. When one hit, the base locked down completely. Every section of the barracks called roll. Every man accounted for. No one moved between buildings unless they absolutely had to. And when they did move, there were cables. Steel cables running between every building on the base. You clipped yourself to one with a carabiner before you stepped outside. This wasn't a precaution. This was a policy written in blood. People had died, literally 20 meters from shelter, because a whiteout hit without warning, and they became completely disoriented. They froze. They were found later when the storm cleared. 20 meters. So when the base went into lockdown, it was total. Everyone inside, everyone accounted for. The world outside the walls ceased to exist until the storm passed. This is the part of the story I need you to sit with. For approximately 5 months, every single time the base went into weather lockdown, they heard screaming. Not wind, not a mechanical noise. Screaming, coming from outside. Short, irregular bursts. Not the sustained howl you'd expect from a storm. Not something that could be explained away by gusts hitting the building at the right angle. Distinct, violent, almost like an animal in tremendous distress. But unlike anything any of them had heard before. They checked roll every time. Everyone was accounted for. No one was outside. The working theory became polar bear. It had to be an animal, because what else could it be? Except polar bears don't do what happened next. Every single time they heard that screaming during a lockdown, they would eventually clear the weather, open the base back up, and make their way to the hangar and engine room. And every time, it looked like a bomb had gone off. Tools thrown across the floor, paperwork scattered everywhere, tables overturned, toolboxes knocked over. The kind of destruction you'd expect from something massive moving through the room in a rage. Then one day they walked in and found a jet engine. A jet engine that had been lifted off its workbench crane and thrown nearly 30 feet across the room. These engines weigh thousands of pounds.
Moving one requires specialized equipment and multiple trained personnel. There was no equipment inside that could explain how it moved. There were no personnel. And here's the thing that makes this story more than just some military urban legend. The hangar and engine room were fully covered by security cameras. Not basic coverage, complete coverage. Every possible point of entry, illuminated by floodlights powerful enough to cut through a whiteout. Nothing was ever recorded entering or leaving those buildings. No animals, no people, no anything.
I want to be clear about something, because I know what some of you are thinking. This was not just a bunch of mechanics scratching their heads and shrugging it off. The destruction of that facility cost serious money. It disrupted at least one ongoing surveillance operation, the kind that put high-level DoD and CIA officials on a plane to Greenland to personally breathe fire down the base commander's neck. This base wasn't just a military installation. It also supported civilian scientific research. The resources were real. The consequences were real. A full investigation was launched. Scientists, engineers, specialists, hundreds of people filed reports and documentation on this. They weren't guessing. They were working the problem with everything available to them. They found no satisfactory explanation. But here's where it gets stranger. After speaking with my mother about this, I learned a few details my father had left out. One night during one of these events, they found that the U-2 spy plane being serviced in the hangar had all of its electronics turned on. The U-2's onboard systems were not standard equipment. They were custom built for that specific airframe and that specific crew's mission. Operating them wasn't a matter of flipping a few switches. It required highly specialized knowledge. On that entire base, only 2 engineers and the flight crew could operate that aircraft's systems. All of them were inside, accounted for during lockdown. Another time, 3 full barrels of hydraulic fluid disappeared. They were never found. And throughout all of this, the control tower was picking up anomalous radar interference and unexplained readings, but only during these events. Never before, never after. They attempted to reproduce the interference in controlled conditions. They couldn't. And then, after roughly 5 months of this, it stopped. No final event, no explanation, no closure. The screaming stopped. The destruction stopped. The interference stopped. The investigation eventually wound down without a conclusion. Life at the base returned to normal. My father rotated out. The years passed. He never had another experience like it in 22 years of service. He didn't go looking for explanations. He didn't need it to mean something. He was a practical man. It happened. He couldn't explain it. He moved on. But he remembered it. I've thought a lot about this story. I don't believe in the paranormal. My father didn't either. And I'm not here to tell you what this was, because I genuinely don't know, and neither did the people who investigated it. What I can tell you is this. Hundreds of people documented this. Scientists were involved. Intelligence agencies were involved. A formal investigation with significant resources found no explanation. A polar bear
doesn't turn on classified aircraft systems. The wind doesn't move a jet engine 30 feet. The cold doesn't make hydraulic fluid vanish. Whatever was out there in those blizzards, screaming in the dark, it was real enough to leave a mark. My father never told ghost stories. This was just something that happened, something he saw, something no one could explain. And sometimes, that's the scariest kind of story there is.
If this is your first time here, welcome. If you've got a story like this, something strange, something you can't explain, drop it in the comments. I read all of them. See you in the next one.